Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Now Next Beyond, Mobileye's 2023 CES press conference. We've been doing this event since 2015, and what I always loved about it is it's not just about Mobileye. It's really a state of the ADAS and AV industry, and that industry can be pretty confusing sometimes. So I've talked to many people that this is really a kind of a highlight event for them. My job is very simple. I'm going to read a short disclaimer before we begin. Please note that today's discussion contains forward-looking statements based on the business environment as we currently see it. Such statements involve risks and uncertainties. Please refer to the accompanying presentation, which includes additional information on the specific risk factors that could cause actual results to differ materially. Without further ado, it's my privilege to introduce Mobileye's founder, president, and CEO, Professor Amnon Shashua. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to see everyone here in person. Almost 3 years since we did in-person meetings. So I'll go into Mobileye's first achievements in 2022, and our strategy going forward, and also kind of the state of the field, both driving assist and autonomous driving. So in terms of our kind of achievement, we took all the pipeline that we have in the driving assist domain. It's about $17.3 billion of pipeline up to 2030. It goes beyond 2030, but we had to put kind of a limit, so it's 2030. What's interesting beyond the sheer number of 17.3, that 6.7 billion of it was design wins of this year. So 6.7 is about 4 times our 2022 guidance. So it shows that the revenue going forward is significantly higher than the current revenue. Another interesting point here is our SuperVision. SuperVision, I'll talk more about it later down the slides, is our system with 11 cameras around the car, providing an eyes-on but full operating driving domain, hands-free driving. Basically, you can drive everywhere from highways to arterial to urban. Already 70,000 cars have been shipped in China with a brand of Geely called Zeekr. The CEO of Zeekr is here, Mr. An. It's a great honor and pleasure. So we have, since we launched last year this product, we have now 6 car makers with the design wins, totaling $3.5 billion of business up to 2030. And this is very significant for 2 reasons. One is the content per car is 2 orders of magnitude higher than the content per car in terms of dollar money per car in our regular driving assist. Second, it's a bridge for autonomous driving, and I'll make that point a bit clearer as we go forward. In terms of our mobility as a service, again, I'll provide more details down the road here, but we see the business for our robotaxi self-driving system up to 2028 for $3.5 billion. And I'll be more specific about how this money is coming, from what sources. But we have $1.5 billion from a single brand. I put here line of sight. Definitive agreement has not been signed yet. But it's very, very solid. $1.5 billion from a single brand of an eyes-off system, what people call level 3, but a very advanced type of usage, going from highway, on-ramp, off-ramp, and starting from a 2026 timeframe. And we expect much more business in that area as well. In terms of our spread of our EyeQ family, you see in 2021, most of the chips were EyeQ4 and EyeQ3, and you see that all the design wins in 2022, we have a very nice spread of our latest chips of EyeQ6 Lite and EyeQ6 High and EyeQ5. Another interesting point here is the number of chips, the design wins in 2022, 63.6 million. Remember in the previous slide, we talked about $6.7 billion contract value. This is an ASP of around $100, which is around double the ASP we have today. So it shows that going forward, it's not only the sheer revenue, goes up, but also the price, the content per car goes up significantly. In terms of the number of car models launched in 2023, so 233 car models with our EyeQ chip have been launched. And you see here the spread of car makers. So it's a very large spread covering the globe, both Europe and US and China and in Japan, covering the entire globe. I put here kind of just I picked a number of notable brands. Again, you see the spread. Normally, we don't have these announcements with car makers. So, people are not aware of, in terms of the spread of launches that Mobileye has. And you can see here all these brands. And this is a small pick out of the 233 brands that launched this year with a Mobileye chip inside. Okay, so now I want to go into a bit deep in strategy. Now, if you look at the media sentiment or kind of the sentiment on the street about autonomous driving, it is kind of a pendulum. It has been shifting. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was, okay, just around the corner. And now it is, 2050. Right? So the truth is not in between. The truth is closer to around the corner. But something has happened. And what that something has happened is actually positive. What happened here is that 7 years ago, car makers were really concerned that they wake up one day and nobody will buy cars. So everything would be robotaxis. There's no reason to buy cars anymore. Today, that concern has kind of dissipated. They understand that for any foreseeable future, people will continue to buy cars. And so it doesn't compromise the robotaxi business. Robotaxi business of moving people, is it has a solid potential, but it opened up a new potential, which is what we call consumer AV. Buying a car with an eyes-off system with a wide variety of usages, starting from highways, then arterials, then urban. We call these blades ODD, Operation Design Domain Blades, ODD blades. And this is becoming really a discourse in the automotive industry with line of sight from 2026. This creates a new potential, a big business potential. So I would like to cover both of them. So first, we see that there are two kind of landscapes. One is the robotaxi landscape, the other one is the consumer AV, and they are very different in nature. The big difference, and when we're talking about a robotaxi, you're talking about a full ODD, because you are driving from point A to point B, and you need to cover all possible scenarios, unprotected turns, traffic lights, pedestrians, urban environment. So it's a full ODD, but limited in geographically. So it's a geofenced area. So you are providing service only in San Francisco, only in Phoenix, Arizona, only in Detroit. Or you pick a city, and you provide there a service. Consumer AV, on the other hand, the ODD can be limited. Say the ODD only highways. It could be only highways up to 130 kilometers per hour. It could be only highways including on-off ramps. It could be, add to it, arterial, crossing junctions straight on, taking turns, only signaled junctions with traffic lights, and so forth. So you can start adding in more and more ODDs, but it has to drive everywhere. You cannot say it will drive only on roads of San Francisco. It has to drive everywhere. So it's a very different problem to solve in terms of scalability. The state today of robotaxi, I think the challenge is not technology. There's no kind of scientific or technological uncertainty with building a robotaxi. It's more about a matter of scale and building a healthy business. How to build a business that, just like any business, you want to make profits. And not just hemorrhage money. This is really the big challenge of robotaxi today. The challenge of consumer AV is that building ODDs that are useful, and I will claim that the ODDs that car makers are talking today are not that useful. So building ODDs that are useful and not creating moonshots. So not, a moonshot after moonshot after moonshot, going from one ODD to another ODD to another ODD, creating another moonshot. How to create a business that is really smooth, incremental, and modular as capturing these eyes off in terms of a consumer AV. And then Mobileye is doing both. We have the robotaxi business, we have the consumer AV business, and of course, I'll provide more details. Another point to make is let's assume that you invested in robotaxi. Now, can you downgrade the technology to consumer AV? My answer is yes, but the robotaxi should drive everywhere. That means at some point in the future, when your robotaxi has been validated to drive on all cities in the US, all roads in the US, then of course you can downgrade it to a lower cost, say specific ODD for consumer car. But if you are validated only in San Francisco, you cannot then offer a consumer AV that drives everywhere, because the nature of the problem is very, very difficult. On the other hand, upgrading consumer AV, going from ODD up to ODD up to ODD, is something that is feasible to make, because every ODD drives everywhere. Once you have something that drives everywhere and is scalable, adding more functionality is something that can be done incremental in a way that I will show you. And this is the Mobileye approach. Upgrading, going from ADAS to supervision, which I'll provide more details, and then to eyes-off blades. So first, I'd like to set a taxonomy. So the taxonomy that the discourse today is level 2, level 3, level 4. This taxonomy is good for engineers. It's not good to kind of talk about a product-oriented language. So the way we created our own language, there's nothing surprising here, yes, but we created our own language, which says that there is eyes on, eyes off, there is hands on, hands off, there is a driver or no driver. That's it. When you have an eyes off system, there is no need to expect the driver to do anything. It means that, say, for example, you have an eyes off, hands off, eyes off system designed for a highway ODD, on and off ramps and so forth. You punch in an address. Once you get onto a highway, you can let go legally. That's the whole idea of eyes off. You can go to sleep, you can do whatever you like. Once the car exits the last highway and needs you, because it's the end of the ODD, and needs a driver to get back of control, it could signal the driver, get back, take control, but it doesn't rely on that. It needs to have the mechanism to stop safely on the side. This is called MRM, minimum risk maneuver, but stop on the shoulder and not stop in lane. Stopping in lane is not safe or not sufficiently safe. Stop on the shoulder. So there is no requirement that the driver does anything. Once it's activated, the driver doesn't need to do anything, because the car can then, once it finishes the ODD, exits and stops on the shoulder. So the way we see that there is eyes on, hands on. This is the regular driving assist, like ACC, like lane keeping assist. Then there's eyes on, hands off. This is a category that I'm going to spend some more time on it. So this eyes on, hands off is kind of an interaction between man and machine. And I have a slide on that. I'll say a few words about that. And then there is eyes off, hands off. This is what we call level 3, level 4, which I don't want to use that language anymore. Your hands off, and legally you can disconnect from the driving experience within that particular ODD. And then the last one, there is no driver. When there is no driver, you need additional mechanism, which is the teleoperation. Somebody in the back office should be able to communicate and give instructions to the car in case something unexpected, not from a safety perspective, but something happened, say a first responder, a policeman approaches the car, wants to talk to someone, so there's a teleoperator to do that. Okay, so eyes on, eyes off, hands on, hands off, driver, no driver. That's it. That's the language. In terms of the value proposition of a hands-off, eyes-on system and an eyes-off system, it's separate value propositions. When talking about a hands-off, eyes-on system, this is an interaction between man and machine. Imagine aviation. You have a pilot. Most of the time, the pilot is supervising the autopilot of the aircraft. Right? Now, there are two pilots. They kind of watch each other that no one goes to sleep. Right? So this is really the reason for two pilots, creating redundancy and making sure that both of them are alert. So same thing with the car. If you have a good driving monitoring system, with the camera watching the driver, then you can create a very good interaction between man and machine, in which the man or woman, right, is supervising the machine, and the failure modes are very different. Right? The machine, we're talking about the hands-on system. So the machine would have failures in unexpected kind of a black swan or kind of corner cases. It may fail. The human will fail in mundane situations. The road is clear, the sky is blue, the lanes are painted, everything is very mundane, and the guy is simply spacing out, right? This is exactly when the machine is very vigilant, right? So this interaction between man and machine creates a higher level of safety. Okay, so this is the eyes on, hands on. The value of the eyes off is buying back time. It's a completely different value proposition, right? Today we're very busy, the roads are very congested, I want to navigate from point A to point B. 90% of the time is within the ODD of the eyes off. I activate it and I read a book, okay? So it buys back time. It's a very different value proposition. Of course, it increases safety because the system is a higher safety than a human level, and I'll get to that later when I talk about the validation. So it also increases safety, but really the value proposition, why do you want to pay money for it, beyond increasing safety, is the fact that you buy your time back. Okay, so a very different value proposition. So when we talk about eyes off, as I mentioned before, there are ODDs, operational design domains. And I listed here kind of a sample of ODDs, right? Highway only, below 60 kilometers per hour in lane. So the car does not change lane, doesn't go above 60 kilometers per hour, only highway. So this is kind of a basic ODD. Many car makers are introducing this kind of ODD in the next few years. Second ODD, the same thing, but up to 130 kilometers per hour. Sounds more useful. The next ODD is the car can go on ramp, off ramp autonomously. So you punch in an address, and to navigate to that address, you need to go through 5 different highways. The system would do this autonomously, right? So this is part of the ODD. Next ODD, you add arterial roads with traffic lights, and then with signal traffic, with signal junctions. The next one is rural, and you can see how you can build the ODDs. We say that the useful tipping point is when it's highways, on and off ramp, up to 130 kilometers per hour. Anything below that, we really believe it's not that useful. And the way we define usefulness is that once you activate the eyes-off system, you'd like it to be continuous until you deactivate and get to your target. You don't want within that period to be on and off, on and off, on and off, right? And then becomes less, in our mind, not useful at all. For example, in ODD1 with the 60 kilometers per hour, okay, you're 61 kilometers per hour, you need to take control. You're 59 kilometers per hour, the car takes control. Or without doing on and off ramps, you have 5 highways to go, and then you have to be alert which highway you need to kind of exit, because the system will not do it on its own. So really the useful tipping point is starting from ODD3 in this chart. Now we have listed, again, this is kind of the Mobileye philosophy. What are the properties of a good eyes-off solution? And we listed 3 of them. The first I just mentioned, it has to be useful. If it's not useful, then why go through this trouble? The second one is less obvious. The second one, we call this no reproducible errors. It means you cannot hide behind statistics, right? How many miles I have collected, an intervention rate, and so forth. You cannot hide behind statistics if there's a systematic error. If there's an error that you can reproduce. Because if there's an error that you can reproduce and there's an accident, you'll go to court and you'll lose, right? It has to be no systematic errors. So I'm giving here an example. Let's assume that I have an ODD1 in the previous slide, up to 60 kilometers per hour, in lane, no changing lane. Because the speed is slow, the designer, the engineer that designed this ODD said, okay, because the speed is slow, I can always brake. I have sufficient time to brake before the car in front of me. Even if the car in front of me kind of changes lane and reveals a stopped car, I still have time to brake and I'll not hit the car in front of me. Okay, I'm fine. But then what happens if you have a truck in front of you and there is now a box falling and moving towards you? The only way to avoid it is to do emergency maneuver to change lane. But this is outside of the ODD that the customer knows about. So this is a reproducible error. Because if there's an accident here, the human will come and claim, I as a human would have been able to avoid this accident, And it's a flaw in the design of the system that the system did not avoid this accident. This is a reproducible error. So what we claim is that an eyes-off system should have no reproducible errors. The result of this is that the system ODD should be much larger than the customer ODD. Even from the customer point of view, the car never changes lane. From the system point of view, the car needs to do much more than that. In terms of selection of sensors, if you are now changing lanes and emergency maneuver, you need to have high-resolution sensors that see around you, right? You don't need that if you only want to stay in lane. So this is a very, very critical point. The third one is expansion of ODD. As you said, there are many ODDs, ODD 1, 2, 3, and 3 slides ago. What you don't want to create is a moonshot going, making a big investment in ODD 1, and then when you go to ODD 2, you have to redo everything. Another moonshot, and another moonshot, another moonshot. What you want to create a path which is incremental and modular. All the investment you have done in the validation of ODDI is valid to go to ODDI plus 1. And then it's an incremental investment. This is what you want to build. Otherwise, from a business perspective and validation perspective, and when I get to validation, you'll see how much effort is made in order to validate an eyes-off system. So here's an example. You don't need to read all this text because I'll explain. So this is kind of the conventional way of going from ODD to ODD. So say, for example, you start with a traffic jam pilot. This is kind of below 60 kilometers per hour. You have limited sensors because they're not changing lanes. You have limited software to process the sensors because the environment is relatively simple. You don't have, pedestrian jumping in or things like that. You don't have roundabouts. So in terms of your perception, right, you're solving a much simpler problem than a car in navigating in an urban environment. So sensors, perception, maps. Maybe you don't even need high-definition maps for such a simple problem. So your investment here is limited. Now you want to go to a higher ODD, say highway pilot, 130 kilometers per hour, going from on-ramp to off-ramp. All of a sudden, sensors is different. All of a sudden, you need to do more. It's not only more compute, but more understanding of the environment. Now, all of a sudden, you need high-definition maps. Your driving policy, your decision-making of the car is much more complicated. So all the investment you did in ODD1 doesn't really help you. You're kind of starting again and creating another moonshot. And then you go up, another moonshot, you go up, another moonshot. What Mobileye designed is the following, is we put all the moonshot in the first column, what we call supervision. This is the 11 cameras around the car running with 2 IQ5 chips, and in 2025 it will be 2 IQ6 chips. It's a full ODD. I'll show you clips in a moment. It's a full ODD, drives everywhere, urban, arterial, highway. It has the driving policy to support this full ODD. So it's not only the sensors, and you have high-resolution cameras, 8-megapixel cameras. So from a sensing perspective, you have the sufficient resolution to understand the scene at high details. You have the compute to build your environmental model, what we call sensing state. You have the driving policy to enable a full ODD, and you have the high-definition maps scalable for driving everywhere, right? So this is one big moonshot. Now going for an eyes-off system, you just need to add redundancy. So you're adding now active sensors for redundancy. You don't need to update your maps because you already built high-definition maps in the first column. You don't need to update your driving policy because your driving policy already was full ODD. All what you need to add an active sensor for redundancy. And the number of sensors and their placement depends on the ODD. And you need to add more compute. But you already built your environmental model, you already built your driving policy, you already have the high-definition maps. So then it becomes incremental. Okay, so this is the Mobileye approach. So this is why the left column, the supervision, even though it's an eyes-on system, it's critical. It's critical because then it's a bridge you invested in that column, going now to eyes-off blades, to eyes-off ODD blades, becomes an incremental investment. This is why, for us, this is really a game-changing concept. So all of this was an intro to our product portfolio. So this is all the logic behind how we designed our product portfolio. So on the left hand, It's the based and enhanced driving assist. So this is front-facing camera. It could be connected to the cloud to our high-definition maps, the crowdsourced maps. I have a few slides about that later. This is something that we developed since 2015. Connecting to those maps create an upgrade of the ADAS, of the base ADAS experience, and there are about 19 car models already using those maps. Third column, I'll kind of skip the second column. The third column is the supervision, and you see the y-axis is the ODD. It's a full ODD, eyes on. It has the resolution to do a full end-to-end hands-off driving in a full ODD, but it doesn't have the mean time between failure to allow an eyes off. It means that there could be all sorts of black swans or corner cases that would require a driver to take control. This is why it's an eyes on system. The second column is downgrading the supervision, what we call supervision light, the same capability with fewer sensors and less compute, only for highways. But it's not then upgradable to arterial and urban. Okay? Then comes, after the fourth column and above, is the eyes-off systems. Right? First, highway on-off ramp. As we said, this is the first useful ODD in our mind. Then comes, and we call this the chauffeur family in terms of product. Then comes the arterial and rural, and then comes the urban. In terms of sensors, the chauffeur highway is the 11 cameras around the car, the supervision, plus a front LiDAR, plus surround radars, 4 corner radars and front and rear radars. The normal radars that the car industry has today. Adding arterial and rural, we're replacing the radars with imaging radars because you need much higher resolution to handle those cases. Going to chauffeur, going to the urban is the same sensor set. Going down to the time of compute, the highway eyes-off is 3 IQ6. The arterial is still 3 IQ6, the same compute. And the urban is 4 IQ6. And then robotaxi, it's the same. Once we reach the full ODD, it's robotaxi, but we need to add a teller operation, which we do not need in the consumer AV. Okay, so this is kind of the product portfolio. We have also developed in the past 4 years what we call IQ Kit, starting from the IQ6, is that our customers, the car makers, can add code onto our platform using OpenCL and TensorFlow. These are open source. These are not proprietary environments like some of our competitors are using. And it took us 4 years because taking our tools and exporting them took hundreds of engineers to do that over the last 4 years. And this is something that we are offering our customers as a way to collaborate on these high-end products to allow them to differentiate and add, whether they want to add driving policy differentiation or whether there's specific camera processing that they need to do outside of what Mobileye is doing. Whatever they want to do, they can write code on top of our code on the IQ6 and the chips that will come afterwards. The hardware is very modular. So the SV62 is the second column. This is the supervision, runs on 2 IQ6. Today it runs on 2 IQ5, but starting from 2025, it will run on 2 IQ6. SV61, the light version of supervision with fewer sensors, it's 1 IQ6. And then the CH, the Chauffeur 63, the 3 IQ6, it's basically it's a combination of SV62 and SV61. You want it to have 2 boards because you need fail operation. In eyes off, you need the fail operation. You cannot have everything on one chip. You need at least 2 to create a fail operation. So you have a board of SV62, a board of SV61, and this is CH63. CH64, both for the robotaxi and for the consumer AV for urban, is simply 2 CH63. It's 2 SV62, so 4 IQ6. So it's really modular in terms of the. And you can see also the power consumption. In this business, this is very, very, very low power consumption. In SV61, it's even passive cooling. So now, all of this was introduction. I talked a lot about supervision as kind of a bridge node from ADAS to eyes-off systems, and our launch partner for this For the past 2 years, we've been working with Zeekr, a brand of Geely that is spinned out of Geely as a separate company. As I said, the CEO of Geely, Mr. An, is the CEO of Zeekr. Mr. An is here. We have been doing, it has been launched during 2022. About 70,000 vehicles are on the road in China. You can see here the placement of the sensors, those 11 cameras. That's 7 long-range cameras with 8 megapixels each and 4 parking cameras. They're fed into a board with 2 EyeQ5 chips. Very low power consumption, so it doesn't affect the range of the car. This is important. We're talking about EVs. Range is important. And it's already, there were a number of OTAs there in China. Here is an example in China of the car. So this is hands-off. He's not touching the steering wheel because of regulation. But this is running in China, production car. But let me show you what this system can do. Put this in Israel. So you can see the hands-free, but now it gives a level 4 type of full ODD type of capability. You see here roundabouts, congested traffic. You see here construction and roadblocks. So all the stuff that you kind of see in robotaxis, it's all into this capability of this package of the system, but it has to be eyes on. It's not eyes off. To create eyes off, we need redundant sensors. Let us run a few more seconds. Okay, it will react to open door. There was an open door there, and then it did an offset. Okay. So in terms of, there are 3 additional global brands to adopt supervision from Geely, starting this year. So 3 more brands, 3 more OEMs in the Geely group, and additional brands of Geely as well. If I try to summarize this, since we started deploying supervision last year, 2022, we have 9 car models from six brands, equipping supervision starting from this year up to 2025 launches. And you can see here the volume. The blue ones is a nominated volume. This orange color is high visibility. If you look, in April, half a year ago, the blue was much shorter. So there's more and more nominations coming in. And this is a product that was deployed within the course of last year. So it shows that there's a great traction. And these brands include, it's a variety of brands, European. I cannot mention the names now. It's not that important, but it's global, right? It's not just in one territory. But as I said, the importance of supervision is not only the business aspect; it is also the fact that it's a bridge for eyes off. This is really all the investment, all the moonshot is in the supervision. All the rest becomes incremental. Chauffeur 63, we have, when I say line of sight, it means it's a definitive agreement negotiation phase, but it's solid. With a major, it's a single brand. This is the $1.5 billion I mentioned in the first and the second slide. This is eyes off, and this is building on supervision. So taking supervision and incrementing with active sensors, front-facing LiDAR, 4-corner radars, to create a highway eyes-off system, including on and off ramp. And I believe that this is just the beginning of every car maker, every brand that invested in supervision will go this route, because it's only an incremental investment to get an eyes-off system. Few words about REM. So just to remind, I've been talking about this almost every year. The idea here of crowdsourcing every car with an ADAS, a front-facing camera with an EyeQ chip doing ADAS. I'm talking about low base ADAS, not about the premium ADAS. Has the capability to extract certain data from the scene, about 10 kilobytes per kilometer, send it to the cloud. And in the cloud, we stitch everything together and we build a high-definition map. So here is an example of it. On the left, this is the kind of information being extracted from this front-facing camera. So we're not sending images to the cloud. It's landmarks, and it's lane marks, and also crowd behavior. So it's very, very sparse data sent to the cloud. And on the right-hand side, you can see how a high-definition map is being built from thousands of cars sending this kind of very, very sparse data. Sparseness is critical because the cost of sending the data should be very, very low. We estimate the cost of the data, say you're driving 20,000 miles per year, it's about $0.50. That's it. So it creates scale. If we will be sending images, the cost would be much higher. It would have prevented scale. So we kind of the miles harvested, 12 billion miles so far, 8.6 just in 2022. We receive 28 million miles of data every day. And you can see how it is rising over time. There are millions of cars already sending us data. We have a customer base, REM partner. We call this REM. 17 brands using this map for upgrading ADAS and also sending us data. Here's just to get an idea of how quickly this crowdsourced. So it said within a day, after a week. Here we're talking about Europe. After 2 weeks, after a month, 10 months. So we have mapped the world, really. The entire world is mapped. Let me show you the US. After a day of data, and you'll see after a week. This is very, very powerful because this allows us to scale. It's not only for supervision or not only for enhancing driving assist, but for eyes-off system. Right? You cannot have an eyes-off system without a high-definition map. There's no way to make this work. So now, before I go to mobility as a service, robotaxi, I want to spend few slides about validating. How do we go and validate an eyes-off system? And the key challenges is first how to build an AI system that on one hand doesn't have no reproducible errors, because I said it's not possible to have a reproducible error. If you have a reproducible error, as a supplier, you will be dead at some point, right? So no reproducible errors. Second, how do you guarantee this level of accuracy? Now, what is this level of accuracy? It's not that I invented all these nines after the 99. When we are talking with car makers, it's a very, very consistent number. Talking about highway ODD, the requirement is 10 to the power of 7 hours of mean time between failure. That means you need to prove that the car will drive 10 million miles without creating an accident. This is about 10 times better than human drivers. Now, this is consistent with all the OEMs, right? And this is also important for public acceptance, right? You're telling the driver you have eyes off. He needs to have confidence. She needs to have confidence in the system. So 10 to the power of 7. So say we're talking about highways. You are driving 40 miles per hour on average on highway. We're talking about 400 million miles. This is a huge, huge number. How do you go and collect this amount of data? So 10 to the power of 7 is this 99 with 99.999% accuracy per hour of driving. So how do you build a system? I'm not talking about validating. How do you build a system that you, kind of the engineering team, would be convinced that it will reach that goal? The next challenge is how to prove. I build a system, I'm certain. So either I go and collect 10 to the power of 7 miles, hours of driving, 10 million hours of driving, or 400 million miles. How do I prove? I need to prove to regulators, I need to prove to the public that the system really meets that goal, or the accuracy goal, right? So we have 3 layers. The first 2 layers are build. The last layer is proof. Okay, so let's go over. The first layer, we call this we call this true redundancy. The way we build a system is through complete redundancy. Supervision is only cameras. You saw supervision can do a full end-to-end autonomous driving, but it requires eyes on because it's not sufficiently safe to say that I'm better than a human driver, right? So we have a subsystem of only cameras, a subsystem of only active sensors, each of them building an environmental model, a sensing state completely separate from the other. Because we're talking about different modalities, it looks like statistically independent. I cannot prove it's statistically independent, and probably maybe it's 99.9% statistically independent, but not 100%. But if it were statistically independent, I can then take the product. So say I collect 10 to the power of 4 hours, 10,000 hours of driving of real data to validate the camera-only subsystem. And then I collect 1,000 hours of real data to validate the radar LiDAR system. If those were statistically independent, then the mean time between failure is the product. If they were completely independent, 10 to the 7, right? This claim will not stand in court, right? Because I cannot prove this. Just like in aviation, you have redundancies. Nobody comes and claims that those redundant systems are statistically independent. You just create more and more redundant systems. So this is not a proving methodology. This is a building methodology. From a robustness point of view, it makes a lot of sense. Okay? So this is how we build the system. Second, we create a photorealistic simulation. Now, many companies in this space, build simulators. What's unique about Mobileye, and this is really unique, what we do is we take our REM, which is all the world is mapped, and from REM, we hallucinate three-dimensional world. What is that? You all know about DALL-E 2 and so forth, right? You type text and you get an image. So now imagine such a network where you feed in REM, you feed in, the high-definition map, and you hallucinate a three-dimensional world. And then once you have this three-dimensional world, you can insert road users. You can insert all sorts of settings that they would like because you hallucinated a three-dimensional world. But this three-dimensional world is based on real roads. And we have all the world maps, mapped. So we can create a simulation of the planet. But this is something very, very unique to Mobileye. So how does this work? Here's just a number of data drives coming into our REM map building. Another stage, this is the full we call this roadbook, our high definition map. And then we start to create a geometric mesh around it, add more information about the landmarks, traffic lights, pedestrian crossing zones, another three-dimensional mesh of the environment. This is hallucination, right? And creating texture, and this is the hallucinated three-dimensional world based on real roads, okay? And then we can, as you see here, then we can create, adding road users and create a full photorealistic scene. It's still ongoing, but you can see that the power of it, right? We can hallucinate the entire planet based on real roads, right? So we're not hallucinating roads. These are the real roads, but we're hallucinating everything else, the buildings and so forth. And have here a photorealistic simulator in which in this simulator we can do two things. Again, we're talking about build. I'm not proving yet that 10 to the power of 7. We can do two things. First is work on edge cases, work on black swans, create all sorts of scenarios to see that we don't have any systematic error. Second, we can run this as kind of a validation of the 10 to the power of 7. That by its own would not stand in court, because the court, if there's an accident, the court will tell us, oh, this is a simulation. It's not the real world, right? But from a building perspective, this is a very good step to make a system that we, the designers, the engineers that build the system, are convinced, if you take the true redundancy and you take the simulation, that the system is meeting the design of 10 to the power of 7. Now comes the last stage of proving. And this is what we call shadow mode. Right? So you have now the system with the sensors and the compute, with the build of the true redundancy and the simulation. You are launching it, but with an eyes-on capability for a period of time. What is that period of time? Say launching 100,000 vehicles. 100,000 vehicles for a brand, this is very, very reasonable. I'm not inventing here a number that is unwieldy. Say you're driving 4 hours a week with hands-off activated. So after 6 months, you collected 10 to the power of 7 hours. Right? So you can then prove after 6 months that have you met the 10 to the power of 7 goal or not? So this is the proving stage. Now, a very, very important point here, this shadow mode is only for validation. It's not for development. It's not that I want to collect events and improve my system. No OEM would agree to that. Why no OEM would agree to that? Because then there is no limit to when you'll end the development. And we know some car makers that, years after years after years, and there's no knowledge of when the system would meet the goal of an eyes off, right? So the car maker needs to know that the goal is feasible before you start the shadow mode. So this shadow mode is only for validation. It's not for development. It's not that you say, okay, now I'm going to get corner cases, improve my system, do an over-the-air update, and wait again for 6 months to collect the data. Because then there's no, you cannot make promises to your customers and not meet them. Most car makers cannot do that. So this is really only for validation and not for development. So these are the 3 stages, 2 stages of build, 1 stage of proving. Last chapter is about mobility as a service. So this is the robotaxi. So this goes, we built a robotaxi. I put in parentheses reference because our plan is not to sell this in volume. We have about 100 cars. We'll have about 200 cars. That's it, right? It's not going to make a business of selling this robotaxi. This is a reference, and I'll be more specific about it in a moment. But just understand the sensor setup. This is exactly the same camera setup of the SuperVision, has 11 cameras around the car, plus a coverage of LiDARs, long-range LiDARs, short-range flash LiDARs, and a few number of radars. So we have a layer of active sensors and a layer of cameras with the true redundancy that I mentioned before. It runs on 8 IQ5 chips, 2 boards, 4 IQ5 chips each, and later it will be replaced with a 4 IQ6 back in 2025 timeframe, okay? So now, as I said before, the real challenge in this area, in this domain, is not the technology. It is really the business. How do you go and build a business? A business that eventually is healthy, right? So Mobileye has no intention of becoming a full operator of fleets of cars. We don't want to become an Uber or a Lyft. So we designed our business in partnership, 2 types of partnerships. One is with platform makers, self-driving platform makers, and I'll mention in a moment a bit more details about that. And another partnership with public transport operators and transport network companies, those that create demand. For the demand generation, we're using our reference, this is the Neo vehicle, we're using that to do POCs. And with the self-driving platforms, we're using their platform and installing our self-driving system onto their platform. So they come from three major players in this platform makers. 2 of them we announced in the past. The 3rd one will be announced somewhere down the road. And this is booked business, hundreds of vehicles 2023, but many thousands, tens of thousands of vehicles starting from 25 till 28. Okay? And this is a booked business of $3.5 billion. In addition, and this is one of them, right? Benteler, they spinned out their model called Holon. Here it is. I think they made the announcement today. If you go to their booth, you'll see this vehicle. And okay. And then the other part is working with the demand generation. Those are the public transport operators, and you see that we have many of them, right? Like Sixt, and then Deutsche Bahn, and Murabani, and Holo, and so forth. With some of them, Beep, for example, is relying on the Holon vehicle, on the vehicle, the platform developed by Benteler. But Sixt would be using our robotaxi, the reference robotaxi, as part of a POC. So we're working with them in small POCs to create the demand for those platform makers in order to create more demand as we go forward. And in this way, we build a business. Right? We're not hemorrhaging money in terms of now putting thousands of cars on the road and waiting for customers to pay a price per mile, and who knows what happens. It is really working with partners that it is their area, this domain of expertise of building the cars, domain of expertise in terms of generating demand, their domain of expertise in terms of the customer facing and so forth. This is outside our domain of expertise and allows us to build really a healthy business. Okay, so I'll finish with a few takeaways. First is the Mobileye SuperVision. It's really the ultimate evolution of driving assist. So driving assist, front-facing camera, sometimes front-facing radar. It's really the ultimate evolution. You are talking about 360-degree perception, high-resolution perception with 8 megapixels, and you can create a very strong product, an eyes-on product, higher safety, also comfort of driving. We see strong traction, already 9 brands, up to 2025 in terms of start of production, and we're just at the beginning. And then what is also important in SuperVision is really, it's a bridge towards eyes off. It's really the moonshot. Afterwards, it's everything incremental. So from an investment point of view, validation point of view, it becomes very reasonable to start from SuperVision and build eyes-off blades, eyes-off ODDs. And lastly, the robotaxi, it's synergetic partnerships. You know, we built the technology, and our challenge now is to make a business out of it and not just, you know, hemorrhage. So building an ecosystem, you know, based on the Mobileye Drive. Mobileye Drive is our self-driving system. Thank you for your patience and your time. I'll end here.